We're back on this lovely Wednesday, the beginning of September, fresh off of Labor Day weekend. We're talking about some new jobs. The NWSL is guaranteeing all of theirs, and MLS and their clubs are making decisions on the futures of others. Let's jump right in. Major League Journeymen back in the house or the office or the mobile office. We've got a lot of options here. Dax McCarty, Alan Gordon, Dan Gargan. We're chatting on a couple different things, but I think where we're going to open here is the major decision in Atlanta. Garth Lagerwey relieves Carlos Bocanegra after 9 years as a technical director, general manager. I think he held a couple titles while he was there with Atlanta United, but another major move for arguably, certainly a top tier club in Major League Soccer, North America, global football in a lot of ways. Atlanta United has been a trendsetter over the past 5-6 years. And Carlos Bocanegra, for his pros and his cons, has been a big piece of that, a big piece of success, a big piece of footballers that have come to this country, the way that Atlanta United has identified player profiles and brought, I think, big home runs into the club. Also, as we noted last episode, some big swings and big misses too. Dax, was this met in Atlanta with a sigh of relief? Was it okay, this is kind of expected? Was it a thank you to Los for what he's done? Yeah, I think with this move, the timing of the move for me says something as opposed to not saying something maybe explicit. But it is significant nonetheless. What's the chatter in Atlanta?
I mean, guys, I feel similarly about this as I do about Gonzalo Pineda being relieved of his duties earlier in the year. I spoke about that a little bit, and you feel, at least I do, as a player who Gonzalo Pineda entrusted me to go on the field and play for him. Carlos Bocanegra was one of the first guys I spoke with at Atlanta United when I was going through my free agency journey. And anytime someone loses their job, me personally, I feel a small sense of responsibility because I think that's on there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And one of the things that I feel is that we haven't been good enough on the field. And that has reflected in these decisions this year. And look, that's the world of professional sports. And that sucks. People losing their jobs, there's never a sigh of relief unless you have some sort of weird personal vendetta or hatred against someone. No, there's never a sigh of relief. There's never a relief or a deep breath or we can actually now go be successful. Like for me, that's never how I felt. And I feel horrible for Carlos because of how much he has put into Atlanta. And the first thing that pops into my head is that he was one of the first people involved in this club, even before they got into MLS. He was hired, I think in 2015 or 16. And he's been with the club since before they were even before they even kicked a ball. So, oh yeah, I think this person's tenure, it needs to be celebrated because he helped build the foundation of the club from the ground up. And I have a personal relationship with Carlos. I knew him on the very few caps and chances I got with the U.S. men's national team while he was still playing. And so I knew him as a player. I knew him as an opponent when he was at Chivas USA. We played against each other a few times. And now I've obviously known him as a sporting director. And I can say that he's a great person and he's a great guy. And he's a person that I think deserves a lot of flowers and a lot of credit for the success that Atlanta United had very early. Probably the model for how to build a successful team right out of the gate. And it almost, you can argue, Dan, it almost changed the perception of what an expansion team was capable of in terms of this new age MLS, right?
Oh, I wouldn't argue that. I would agree with that 100%.
Let's take the Chicago Fire out of it because Chicago obviously was highly successful in MLS 1.0 when they came into the league. Atlanta United,
sure. Seattle was too.
Yeah, but Seattle was too, but in a different way. They
in a
weren't
in a different way.
they
had
weren't winning MLS Cups right
they were
away,
not
and they weren't
successful. Not with
they
wins.
weren't buying
Not
they
like
weren't
that.
buying they weren't buying players for $8-9 million to then flip them for MLS record fees. So I think that I don't know if that was like Carlos's belief. I'm sure there was a couple people that were making those decisions, but he deserves a ton of credit for those early years in Atlanta. Okay, now you want to fast forward to the reality of the job and the reality of how professional sports works. The last couple years for Atlanta United have not been up to the standard that he set in those early years. And it's not just him, right? Like this is a club that has a tremendous amount of ambition. So you don't have one person making the decisions for a whole club. This is a collective effort. Gonzalo Pineda, he was obviously the person who was deemed responsible for us not having a great start to the season. Okay. You have to live with that as a player. That happens. And now Carlos is obviously been deemed responsible for, I guess, right? Like the path that we've gone down now that hasn't been successful the last couple of years. Right. And so,
Yeah.
there's no easy way to look
that's the
at
human
this.
element, Dax. That's the human element, right? And I can appreciate that. Like, Los was one of the voices that hired me to be a part of that organization too, and I saw it from the way that they built it. And he was very transparent and open, as they all were in the early years. Like it was a really cool environment to be around. Here's the reality of it though, is this is professional sports, and like unfortunately like the performance has not lived up to it. So Los loses his job, or Pineda loses his job, Los loses his job. The reality is the players are going to come next, right? Like we're not holding on to those realities.
And that's something that I think there needs to be a heightened awareness of as players in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
We're clinging on to a playoff spot right now with Atlanta United. We had a big win in Charlotte over the weekend. Very important, because I tell you what, this is MLS for you, perfect encapsulation of it. There's 5 or 6 teams that still think they have a chance to make the playoffs, and we're right in that.
And they realistically do, right?
Yeah, we do. And so we had a huge win, but the reality of this year for Atlanta United is that we have not been good enough. Top to bottom. It's okay to say that. It's okay to admit that. It's okay to have higher expectations for this club. And I certainly did. That's why I came here, right? And the truth of the matter is it's been inconsistent, and the results have not come. And so when that happens, people get held responsible. It's already been the head coach, the sporting director, and you're right, Dan, the players will come next. And if I wasn't retiring, I would be going into this offseason, unless you are maybe a handful of players, because you can't transition out 20 players. Unless you are one of the 4 or 5 players on this team that they are deeming is the core and they want to build around.
Or have guaranteed contracts.
Or a guaranteed contract.
Or have guaranteed
whatever.
contracts.
But I would be very anxious going into the offseason thinking I may or may not be back because the players come next, like you said. And so look, there's a lot of pressure on us as players for the next six games, for our remaining 6 games, to make the playoffs and to show this club that A, you want to be here, and B, you're good enough to be here and take this team to the heights of a championship. Because there are no more there's no more people to blame, right? Like
there's no more room for that, right? So
correct. It's on the players now.
Gordo, when you see this, when you see a move like this, right, it instantly reminded me of the trajectory or the arc of Chris Klein and his tenure with the Galaxy, and the way that fans take aim at something and then sour on that individual. And once it sours, it's tough to go back, whether you're having success or not. The opinion has been made, and it usually happens that way in professional sports. When you saw the news about Bocanegra being removed, was it a surprise or was it an expected move? And do you fall into that camp of understanding where the fans are souring on a leadership position, and that is what is to be blamed for the failures of the organization?
Lot to unpack with that question, Guards.
Yeah, I should probably limit my words. You should probably do
it in sections. What I will say is that that's the first thing I thought about too. I thought about Chris Klein. I did not hear the negative chatter about Bocanegra. I wasn't as close to it as I was to the Klein demise, right? And where the fans were coming out and they were outspoken and they had signs and they were striking, and it was very, very, and he wrote a letter. I didn't see any of that coming from Carlos. So it was a little bit of a surprise. However, if you sit and think about it for 5 seconds, and the way that everything that Dax just said, kind of the trajectory and what happens is it is a natural thing. You know, he has obviously been made responsible for the signings that have not worked out. He was able to stay there and he did a great job for the 9 years that he was there, or the first part of it. We gave him credit because he hit home runs. He hit home runs. And then he was able to kind of go through the years following that. But then in the last 3 or 4 years, the money spent, the big money spent, big money, and this league is getting to a point where it's huge dollars, especially for Atlanta. They're spending at an incredible rate. Everybody knows it. You know, Arthur Blank is going to open his checkbook, and that comes with a lot of responsibility, and with a sword on it. With a sword, right? You know, your head is on a chopping block because I'm spending all this money, and you better deliver, or somebody is going to get replaced. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so it's a little bit surprising, you know. It's when you think about how people get through these years, you know, like Garth is he's going to say, hey, he's basically saying, hey, this is Carlos, you know. Now we have freedom, and I'm going to do the right things and hire somebody else to come in and do it. And they're going to take a chance with this guy that's coming in. But the guys that get left, they kind of put the responsibility. And, you know, it's sad because Carlos has done a ton of great things for U.S. soccer and for this club. But, you know, ultimately somebody's head has got to roll, and his is.
Well, here's the other thing, like that when you look at Atlanta United's history, it's interesting because I see a lot of parallels here with the Galaxy. I see a lot of parallels with what's going on, which is it's tough. It's tough to reshape an organization. Atlanta United hired Tata Martino and basically did no wrong, right? They every single thing that they did was right. After it was Tata, it was Frank de Boer, which was a miss. It was Gabriel Heinze, which was a bigger miss. Then you had Gonzalo Pineda, which ultimately gets deemed a miss. You can characterize his tenure however you want to, but he didn't do what the expectations were in Atlanta United. That's a lot of leadership change that is ultimately comes back down on the technical staff and the technical part of the front office. It's tough to outrun 3 strikes.
And Dan, look at it from this perspective. Gordo, after he got over his initial confusion at the question, he actually made a very poignant point about Carlos. Let's think about this. He might have been a victim of his own early success because the bar was set so high. You win an MLS Cup in your second year. You sign 2 generational players for MLS standards in Joseph Martinez and Miguel Almiron. You sign one of the best coaches in MLS history in Tata Martino. Then you go out and you sign Darlington Nagbe, one of the best free agent signings in the history of this league, one of the best midfielders to play in this league, and you win an Open Cup and a Campeones Cup. Then after that, it starts to unravel a little bit. You lose Darlington. You have some misses with these big, purchases, these South American kids, and it doesn't really work out. And the one thing is that you said, Dan, that really hits home is the coaching hires have never seemed to be able to hit the heights of what Tata was able to provide Atlanta United. And for me, that's a big part of it. That is a massive, massive part of it, because if it's not stable in the coaching ranks, your team, no matter how much talent you have, it might be a little bit unsettled, right? And so for me, that was a good point that Gordo made, was that Los came out of the gates hot and every decision was right. The club made every decision right. They knocked it out of the park with players, staff, coaches. It's different for a team like Nashville. Nashville, the build was completely different. And so, you're not having a ton of early quote unquote success winning trophies. Yeah, you have consistency making the playoffs, but the bar is lower. The bar for Atlanta United was set through the moon right away, but the bar in Nashville was lower. So maybe now that Nashville's going through a struggle, I see, like you said with the Galaxy, but I see with Nashville, they're going through a struggle right now. But now the sporting director gets a blank slate because they're like, all right, we're going to give you a chance to bring us into MLS, whatever, 2.0, now that we have 4 or 5 years of runway. It's just totally different, right? And so, look,
dude,
I just think
it's very difficult.
I think Los, I think Los,
right?
To finish it up with Los, I think he should be remembered for the organization that he has helped build. The academy at Atlanta United is strong. The training facility is one of the best in the league. Obviously, the stadium that they share with the Falcons is one of, if not the best in the league. And the early success that he had, it really set the stage for these new expansion teams like LAFC to come in and say, look, this is the model that we're going to follow at Atlanta United. And I think Carlos Bocanegra deserves a ton of credit for that. And he deserves a big thank you from the Atlanta United fans for that early success, because they were spoiled early on. It's not, that success right out of the gate is not a given and is actually very rare.
Oh yeah.
Last thing here,
Go ahead, Gordo.
is that I think it should also be said, and I agree with you, Dax. I mean, a great guy. However, just remember, he walked into that job, that position, right out of playing. I mean,
he had no experience.
He had no experience.
That's what I was going to touch on that, Gordo. That's a great point. He was a rookie. He was a rookie front office like architect.
Right.
One of, and arguably one of the most successful in the history of the league, that put together in a lot of ways the expectation for Atlanta United's product, right? Atlanta United's product is based on the Tata Martino, Carlos Bocanegra, Darren Eales years. That's who Atlanta United still stands for. And they still get credit today because of it, because they've struggled ever since. So he has, and rightfully so, that on his resume that will never be taken away from him. Also, to your point, Dax, and I would agree with this completely. It's really, I would have to think it's very difficult to recapture that type of magic from the outset. You get that and you find that. Winning a second championship is hard, man. That's hard to redo, especially with a different set of characters. Gordo, you touched on this a little bit in Atlanta United being almost a foundational piece for the LAFCs to come after them. And obviously there are plenty of foundational pieces for Atlanta United to build off of or build from, right? NWSL also comes out with a new CBA, transformational. I mean, professional sports will change because of this, has already changed because of what they are doing. But it was mind-boggling to me, almost to the point of like post-traumatic stress disorder was what I was feeling like when I was reading all the things that they got in this, also in a midterm agreement. They're not even anywhere near the close of the existing agreement that they were in, and they went into ownership and transformed their contract, transformed their collective bargaining agreement. How much of this, Dax, when you're reading this, when you're talking about the complete free agency at the expiration of contracts, you're talking about guaranteed contracts, no player drafts, parental leave, you have workload guardrails. Like, I mean, it's just one thing after another where you're like, I can recall the literally thousands of hours that I spent on collective bargaining agreement calls, in meetings, in off seasons. I'm talking days, weeks, months, years that I put of my life towards the betterment of Major League Soccer's Players Union, Players Association now, that these women have seemingly gotten in one CBA, which I can only applaud them with every ounce of my being for what they've accomplished, because it is transformational. That's the only way that I can describe it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's great.
How do you feel as a current professional athlete, because you are still current? How does all of those things coming in to the NWSL make you feel about the position of Major League Soccer?
Well, first of all, I couldn't be happier for them, and I couldn't be more jealous. It's
Okay.
actually,
There you go.
my jealousy meter is like off the charts right now that they were able to go in, knock on the door to the owners and say, hey, listen, what if we just decided to do this? And the owners were like, great, let's do it. Right. Because I don't, you, first of all, shout out also to the girls who and their Players Association for being able to accomplish this. That's a massive win, I think, for all professional players, professional soccer players, especially male, female, doesn't matter. But shout out to the owners too for being like, you know what? Let's do something different. I think the NWSL took the MLS model and said, maybe we need this to be successful and sustained for a couple of years. But shout out to the NWSL owners who said, let's be bold, let's be different, and let's actually flex our financial muscles, because this is going to be financially extremely, I think, burdensome for these owners, right? You have fully guaranteed contracts. You don't have option years, right? You have no draft, which means you're going to have to sell girls coming out of high school or college on why they should sign with your team. And the way you sell them is infrastructure, guaranteed compensation. Like, this is going to cost them an exponential amount more money than it would have if they would have still played under a current CBA, right? And so for me, nothing but positive things to say about everything involved in this deal. The one thing that I also want to hit on is the no draft. That is, like you said, Dan, the word I really like, transformational, because regardless of how it's done in the rest of the world, we live in a great country. We live in the US, and how it is done in the US in professional sports traditionally, there's a draft. Players are thrown into a draft after college, and you are allocated to usually the best players to the worst teams, because that's how the draft order goes. Now, players have full autonomy to decide, I want to play for my hometown team. I want to play for the richest team. I want to play for a team on the beach. Like, that freedom has to feel so good. I try to think back to 2006 when I turned pro, to think I was at UNC. I finished my sophomore year. I signed with an agent, and my agent presenting me with like 5 different teams and 5 different offers for different monetary values and different bonus structures, and saying, hey man, take your pick. I mean, I think my head would have exploded. Literally. That is, and as a young person, that freedom is going to feel so good for these girls who want to stay and play in front of their hometown teams, or they want to play for a certain reason. Who knows? Who cares what it is? They have the freedom to choose. I mean, that's incredible. So I think this will eventually set the standard for what MLS does down the line. I don't think MLS is going to follow suit anytime soon, but I'd be shocked if MLS doesn't eventually eliminate the draft with all these different homegrown territories, all the different rules about how players are allocated. I think that is, for me, the most transformational part of this deal, and it's absolutely fantastic. It gets me really excited for the future of the women's game.
Before we go too far down the draft discussion, I want to go back to the ownership discussion and kind of what maybe they were thinking. Gordo, I wanted to get your opinion on that. Is this like just a completely different place that we're at in society, that this is the way that ownership is thinking and is approaching a professional sports league? Are they just completely missing the amount of work that this is going to be transformationally adding to their clubs? Are these owners, because I almost thought, like, oh my God, this is going to make Carlos Bocanegra's job so hard. And obviously he's not in the NWSL, but the people that are in those front office layers that have some really kind of protections built in, this just kind of threw that out the window. And now I'm wondering, okay, Gordo, when you see this, when you think about this, like, you're not a player anymore. Do you have a care there, or does it not even matter?
Yeah, funny you asked, Gargs, because I read it and I said, bullshit. And I disagree with Dax, because I'm not ready to give the owners any credit at all yet. Okay, wait a little bit for signing it, right? But what my intuition says, because we were drugged
Who hurt you, Gordo? Who hurt you?
We were drugged around Peach City, like holding on and just getting raked, by the coals. We got raked by the coals, and the PTSD that you spoke about, because how many guys, man, I could think back, and I remember some veterans when we were young that they would fly in, they would sign them for 2 weeks and then cut them, and they had families, right? Like there's a million stories of how bad it was for us and making no money. And I'm really excited for the girls. I am in complete agreement with that about, these different changes and how it's suited for them, because they aren't making a lot of money. Some of them have side jobs to make other money. Some of them are living in host houses, all this kind of stuff. It's not easy. It's not easy for them. But I want to say there's going to be some things that the owners come out, because they have to make money. To your point, they've got to make some sort of money, and I don't know how this is all going to play out. I think there's going to be, and you know how these leagues work, especially the MLS. They're kings of making new rules. Hey, new rule. You can't do this, you can't do this. So there's going to be some changes. So I'm not exactly willing to say, hey, thanks, owners, you've done them a great job.
You're not ready to trust yet.
No, I'm not ready to trust until I see the product. Secondly, I think this is more transformational than just soccer. Okay, I think this is the first time in history, unless I'm wrong, first time that men are going to be asking for equality from the ladies and what they have, because every man in every sports league and division is going to be saying, wait, why aren't we getting what they got? You know what I mean? So this is the first time it's been flipped, and it's great to see. Maybe we just need to have women, asking for everything, and then we ride their coattails, because they seem to be a lot better at getting things than we.
Hey, can you go ask? Can you go ask?
Negotiate for us too, please.
I don't. If I ask, he's going to say no. But if you ask,
go ask. You know what I mean? But this is transformational. I love to see it. I love every bit of just even the thought. Who would have even thought this was even possible, or to even ask for it? Right?
And don't you think that there's more to this that we don't know? Like the owners have to have some sort of like data, like saying that like, yes, this is going to be super beneficial for like not only from a PR perspective, but also from like a financial perspective. Like you're going to have better players and better markets from different countries coming here, and we're going to be able to sell this and make more revenue that way, add revenue.
Well, here's the other thing. Here's the other thing. And I have 2 boys and I have 2 girls as a father. And what I've come to the conclusion is that they are very different. They're both human beings, but man, boys and girls are different animals. And I think that I've also learned throughout most of these processes that ownership has a different set of rule books and playbooks with all the answers in it than most of the people that are playing. And it takes longer for the players to figure it out. I think that there has to be some correlation to comfort for women players than maybe correlates to males. And I could be totally off on that, but I think that if I was a betting man, I would guess that is something that some thought group or think tank is telling ownership, hey, if you accommodate certain values and certain variables here, you're going to have a better player, you're going to have a more thoughtful player, you're going to have a better team, X, Y, and Z, right? But I also go back, and maybe this is the PTSD. I mean, maybe this is just the experience that I lived through, but I think about the draft, and my instant reaction was, if there's no draft, how are players like me going to get on a team? Because I got on a team and I had an opportunity because I went and I literally scratched and clawed for it. I wasn't like the highest draft pick. I wasn't Dax coming out of UNC with options and agents. I was calling agents and they were like,
"Who are you?"
Yeah, I'm booked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was different. So now I'm thinking, okay, is this actually a good thing? And I genuinely don't know. And I mean, to Gordo's point, like, I think qualitatively you can say like, yeah, you've removed some of this stuff that does put really kind of significant handcuffs on people, right? But at the same point in time, I also am looking at this and I'm like, man, well, this is just maybe it's just because we've become so accustomed to operating in this way. Like there's a sense of excitement. There's an appreciation that, this club drafted me and they want me. I also think about the players that get drafted that have almost an automatic into the team. Like players that get drafted in the top 10, they're never going to throw that player away, whether they're good enough or not. So they get a longer look from a coaching staff or from a team or from a club. I think it's gonna flip things pretty significantly.
Different set of handcuffs. And that was a hot take, and that was groundbreaking. Men and women are different. Ladies and gentlemen.
Dan Gargan, he broke that on here first.
Listen, guys, that's a controversial take in some circles these days.
Sure is.
Very different.
Hey, well, let me counter that, Dan. You have the same scouts that are still going to be scouting these different pathways. And I think that the scouting, I'm not sure. I think scouting in MLS has improved dramatically. Maybe global scouting has. I'm not sure how big or built out the scouting networks in the NWSL or in women's soccer are. So yeah, the cream is always going to rise. The best players are just going to have more options now. And once the best players have chosen where they are going to go, all the other players then get brought up.
There's one more
on a contract right away. Maybe they don't get offered a contract right away, but maybe they get invited into preseason and they are like the last draft pick who just has to grind. They're the Dan Gargan who has to prove themselves, and they've got to earn a minimum contract.
Sure, and those players aren't going to disappear. Like they are in a lot of ways the backbone of all teams, right?
So
and I get that.
Okay, go ahead. You got something?
No, I'm just going to say there is another dynamic here that I did see come out of this, and the Women's Super League of USL is also coming to fruition, which is now potentially a major competitor to NWSL in your own backyard. As much as we want to say like, hey, these owners are just doing this out of the kindness of their heart, I have to think that there's also a real significant worry because the Super League in USL, because they're a new league, they don't have a draft. So they're starting from scratch. They get to build it up. And Amanda Vandervoort, who I think is the commissioner or the president of the Super League, is MLS grown. She was in MLS front office for a really long time and knows the ins and outs and know the ways to obviously build a very successful rocket ship, right? I have to think that there had to be some concern of, okay, how do we get ahead of this? And how do we protect our player base? Because if the Super League comes in and says, hey, we'll give you all of this stuff, just come on over. Now you're fighting for your own product.
You're fighting for relevancy in your backyard.
Do you think that this is a way to, because there's guaranteed contracts, it's basically you can't go anywhere because we don't want you to leave. So they think they're getting a guaranteed contract, which they are, but it's also protecting the owner. So it works both ways because they're saying, hey, we got you on a contract, you can't get out of it. And
you're here for 3 years.
You're here. Could be.
That would be the case. That would be the case even with option years. You guys know how it is. Oh, you want to leave?
True.
Guess what?
One-way option.
I still have you under my control. Listen, I think competition's great, and I can't speak eloquently about this new women's USL Super League that is being introduced because I don't know enough about it. But competition's great. Competition between leagues, competition between teams, competition for players. It raises all boats and it provides more jobs for people and it opens more eyes. So I think that, this is a massive step for women's soccer in this country. And I think you guys are both right about the owners. There has to be some sort of back end data that says that this is going to be more beneficial for them in the long run, whether that be for their pockets, whether that be for TV deals. I don't know. They have something that they know that we don't, right? But you still have to give them credit for agreeing to this. This is a transformational deal that, let's be honest, the MLS owners would have never agreed to this in a million years. Okay. And I think that even with this new information, if I can circle it back to how it affects the men's game in MLS going forward, even with this new information, I still think the MLSPA, I mean, we're going to try to ask for the moon, and we're going to try to ask for full free agency, for more money, for only guaranteed contracts with no options. What are the chances the MLS owners actually look at the NWSL and say, oh, yeah, well, out of the kindness of our hearts, we've seen that this is successful, so we're going to agree to that? Well, it's not going to happen, right? They're going to continue to fight to keep the restrictions on as much as possible. That's just how it's always been. And that is us being hurt time after time after time with these fights, because they get ugly, right? And so full credit to the NWSL for being able to pull this off, especially in the middle of a deal. That's crazy.
Both of them. I mean, both sides to come to an agreement. It does take real concession and real genuine involvement from both sides, no matter what the agreement is. And for them to do that in the middle of their current CBA, to extend that out past 2030, I think is where they extended it to, is really, really impressive. I almost couldn't believe what I was reading. I really couldn't. It took me a number of times to get through it and be like, I'm flabbergasted. I also, along with the NWSL and their CBA, another thing that I think we have to touch on is one of the greatest of all time hanging up her boots and being considered. Alex Morgan announces that she's done. And I mean, an incredible career, a GOAT resume, another transformational individual. I was thinking about this when I saw this announcement, because I think this came out today. And I want you guys to tell me where I'm wrong. So I thought about, we've discussed the Mount Rushmore of men's soccer, the Mount Rushmore of women's soccer in the US. So US specifically, I would really only probably US specifically, Michelle Akers, Mia Hamm, Alex Morgan, Trinity Rodman. Those are my four.
Wow. No way.
You threw me for a loop there at the end.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
And I intentionally, because I think that we have to, I think the way that women's sports is trending now, I threw Trinity Rodman in because I think she's incredibly talented, and she's a transformational player that is very emblematic of today's game. And I think today's game in women's sports is going to completely change the trajectory of anything that has happened up to this point. And that is a very easy statement to make. That's why I'm throwing Trinity Rodman on the Mount Rushmore. I think the other three, fantastic for paving the way for whatever is to come next. And that's why she's my fourth.
That's incredibly bold, Dan. I respect it. I don't agree with it. I think your first.
That's why I offered it to you. Tell me where I'm wrong.
I think your first three are right. I don't think anyone can be on a Mount Rushmore after 2 years.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. Respect, please.
Give me your fourth.
I don't think you can have, regardless of how you feel about her personally and some of the stuff that's happened with her off the field, you have to have Hope Solo on there. She's the greatest women's goalkeeper of all time. And the stuff that she did on the field, look, Alyssa Nair is fantastic. I think Alyssa Nair is tremendous. I still think Hope Solo is in a category to herself. In terms
Are you putting Tim Howard on your Mount Rushmore just because was the best goalkeeper?
No. But I think Hope Solo was like this word we've been using about the CBA. She was transformational. I don't think there was never a women's goalkeeper like her. She took the bar and raised it to a level that I still don't think has been hit by any other player. Can't say the same about Tim Howard. That's just a fact. So she's the fourth on my Mount Rushmore. But look, Alex Morgan, to touch on her career a little bit, I still remember after a lot of the 1999ers or whatever, some of the transcendent players that we remember winning the World Cup on soil after they were ushered out and a new generation came in. I mean, Alex Morgan was I think the first player that a lot of people she's a little bit younger than me, but in terms of women's sports, we resonated with her because of how special she was on the field, and things that she did were very unique and similar to Mia Hamm, another transformational player, right? And so the goal scorers usually get all the glory, but the way that she did it, I remember thinking the first time I watched Alex Morgan play, I'd never seen anyone faster than her on a field for the female game. I'd never seen anyone faster. And her athleticism, her finishing ability, like her raw just power, like she would sometimes when she would play in games, she would make it look like she was playing against children. Honestly, I think that's how much her athletic prowess blew everyone else out of the water. And so, you said the right things, Dan. She had a fantastic career. She was an unbelievable player. She had, I think, a massive effect on changing the payment for the women. She was a big dog in that fight. And so I think for her contributions on the field and off the field, she absolutely deserves to be in the Mount Rushmore, and salute to her. I'm sure she's got plenty of things going on off the field. Congrats on your pregnancy as well. But yeah, she's going to be very successful off the field as well.
Before I tell you, or before I pass this over to Gordo, who has now had his time to do his research, there's no way that the only other person that I was considering is Abby Wambach. And so there's no way I'm putting Hope Solo in front of Abby Wambach if we're talking about transformational players.
No problem. That's your Mount
That's just me.
You put someone who literally just turned pro.
Just started.
Yeah.
Just started. I know. I love it. Gordo, what do you got?
No one else does. You're the only one that loves your Mount Rushmore. It makes sense.
My Mount Rushmore is Raponi. No, I'm just joking. I would
have liked it. I would have loved it more if you said that, if you weren't joking.
Well, I forgot about Carly Lloyd too.
I'm going Mia Hamm. Thanks, Gargs, for taking on my people.
Sorry.
Carly Lloyd, Abby
Good
Wambach,
pick.
and Alex Morgan.
Mia Hamm, Carly Lloyd,
Abby Wambach,
and Alex Morgan. That's pretty good. That's tough to argue.
And I win.
That's tough to argue.
I think
that's good that you
Mount Rushmore
did the research while the adults talked. Well done.
I forgot what Lloyd's first name was. That's what I was looking at. Dude, Wambach, the first time I ever met her, she used to work out in the Galaxy. The U.S. women used to work out in L.A. And I was passing her, and she was benching 145 on an incline bench. And I couldn't even do that at the time. And I was like, oh my God.
She's a beast.
So she's a beast. But
I don't think I'll find much disagreement from you guys with this statement. It is significantly harder to do a Mount Rushmore of the U.S. women's national players than it is for the U.S. men.
No chance.
Yeah. Way harder.
Really?
Seriously, dude?
Maybe.
There was a lot of early greats in U.S. women.
Think about all the other ones we're missing, dude.
Julie Foudy, Leslie Osborne,
Joy Fawcett, Brianna Scurry.
The reason is because they all have World Cups and Olympic
multiples.
Exactly.
Megan Rapinoe, you got.
Even think about someone who wouldn't make any of our Mount Rushmores, but a good friend of mine, Heather O'Reilly. She has 250 U.S. national team appearances, gold medals, World Cups. Come on.
You're probably right.
I think we're doing for the women. It's a lot more splitting hairs than it is for the men.
Correct.
The men. There's a clear separation of the greatest of all time. I feel like the women that greatest of all time. Man, those those three classes. Yeah, those classes of players were definitely a different cut.
Very, very different.
Even Brandy Chastain, dude. Classic.
All of it. There's 20, 25 players.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we might need to dive into that and actually do a little research and come back on this. We probably will get shredded for this one, but and rightfully so. Let's revisit this, because I think this conversation has definitely sparked a couple of thoughts in my mind. I think we gotta go back and do our homework, because we're also, Dax, heading in, as you pointed out, 7 games left, heading into the MLS stretch run. We got some championships upcoming. US Open Cup final. When is that? Is that the end of September?
September 25th, I think I saw.
25th. And then, playoff supporter shield. We got, as we've seen, teams and clubs that are, quote unquote out of it are looking to the future and making some decisions here, and who's available, some of these dominoes are going to start dropping. So,
and Dax has 7 games till Christmas, dude. Potentially more, but
potentially more.
7 games till Christmas, dude.
Hey, let's make the most out of them, bud. Let's make the most out of them. All right.
Hey, I would like 3 yellow cards and 1 red. 1 red card.
Go out in a blaze of glory.
Go out in a blaze. I mean,
throw my jersey.
Listen.
Why don't I just pull an Antonio Brown?
Hey,
just take my jersey off and run out.
Dax, they can't tack on suspensions to next year, so keep that in mind.
Guys, I was just thinking about this. We just got drug tested recently, and you guys know how much fun those are. I was thinking, you know what? I should just do all the steroids possible and just get superhuman for these next 6 games. And literally be like, have like a Usain Bolt 40-yard dash time and like just be like jacked.
Just do like 10 cycles in the next 6 days.
Do a bump before a game too.
Nah, you couldn't do that. Couldn't finish that way. You can finish with a red card though, so keep that in mind. Don't take that off the table.
Okay.
Major League Journeymen, we're out. See you next time.